Okay, yeah, I got it. Okay, so we're recording now, so I'll start again. Basically, this is the meeting of the Hempstead Harbor Protection Committee. This is our first time on Zoom, and we are recording it because under New York pause, they do allow meetings by Zoom or other video means for municipal government type of meetings, but they have to, one of the restrictions is they have to be recorded. So they are recorded, and I did create a YouTube channel for the Hempstead Harbor Protection Committee. So after this meeting, it'll be placed on the YouTube channel. So if anybody wants to view it, they're welcome to do that. But with that said, we can turn to our regular business. And the first order is to review and approval of the draft minutes of the March 11th meeting. Have you all gotten a chance to review them? I can put them on the screen if anybody requests it. Any comments? If not, then I'd like to ask for a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Who's that, Abby?
Yeah, that's Abby.
Okay. Any discussion? No. All those in favor? Say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay. Speaking of dues, we did send out notices right after the March 11th meeting, and we did receive 3 municipalities have paid their dues: Roslyn Harbor, Flower Hill, and Seacliff. But that still leaves 6 others in process. So I would like to remind you that if you haven't started those balls rolling, it would help, for cash flow and all of that.
Eric, did you get a response from our mayor when you resent the note?
Sands Point?
Yeah.
I haven't heard from them, no.
Okay. All right. I have a meeting with him.
Yeah.
I have a meeting with him Tuesday. I'll ask.
Okay. Normally they wait till the beginning of June because that's the beginning of the fiscal year. So that's not a problem.
Okay.
I did hear from Roslyn. Roslyn is, it's going to be approved at the next Board of Trustees meeting. And I did hear from Nassau County that Dan Fucci has put it through to be processed, and with the county, everything takes a long time. So at least we're starting the process a little earlier this year, and hopefully there'll be no glitches. But who knows with this coronavirus and everything else that's going on, with the county, with finances and all of that. And I hope that goes through because they're our biggest dues payer. So with that said, just we'll keep on top of it, and hopefully the money will come in the next couple months. So, since the last meeting, we were very fortunate to receive $5,000 in funding from the Nassau County Soil and Water Conservation District. We had applied for the winter monitoring program, and we were awarded that. I can go into a little bit more when we get into Soil and Water Conservation District updates about some of the other things that were funded, but that does provide the funds we need to have the Coalition Save Hempstead Harbor do the winter monitoring program. As you'll recall, in the previous meetings, we did authorize the committee or authorize the village to enter into an agreement with the Coalition to Save Hempstead Harbor for the 2020 to 2021 water monitoring program. We authorized up to $89,000, of which $75,000 we're getting in a grant from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and $14,000 is coming from our account, which in turn is being paid for by the Celino grant that we received. So when Carol and I reviewed the costs for the program in anticipation for this next round. The cost basically came to $75,000 to do the core program, which is the summer program, $14,000 to do the annual report. They subcontract that to Fuss and O'Neill, and the coalition, does part of it itself. And those costs have gone up because of having to do the DUAR for the state in order to use the Celino funds towards this. So, and then, additional monitoring that's been going on, all of that increased that. So that, and the cost for doing the winter program is $5,000. So we had authorized $89,000. I'd like to request that we do a new authorization to go up to $94,000 with that additional cost being funded by the Nassau County Soil and Water Conservation District. This would basically cost us nothing, additional because it's already funded, so that we can have a full program for this coming year. Any questions? Or Carol, if you want to, did I miss anything?
Only people might not be aware of what's involved in the winter monitoring. We had actually proposed a work plan for the Long Island Sound Futures Fund grant, and it always gets very confusing because you end up overlapping over 3 years worth of programs. And what we had anticipated doing included biweekly testing of nitrogen, which included lab fees, which went beyond the actual bacteria sampling that we had been doing for this program. So now it's biweekly sampling of nitrogen and bacteria for certain stations monthly so that we can keep a check on Scudder's Pond. One of the Scudder's Pond checks includes an outfall north of Tappan Pool, which actually blends water coming down from Littleworth Lane and coming out of the pond. So this was important to monitor over the winter. We've been doing it now over the summer, and we just want to see what's happening in terms of nitrogen going beyond the bacteria. So the program has escalated. It was a part of a work plan that we thought would be funded, as I said, by the Long Island Sound Futures Fund. That was cut back for 2 years in a row, actually. And it was great that Nassau County Soil and Water Conservation District was able to come up with the money to keep that proposed work plan in place, so we can do that now.
Anybody have any questions? If not, does somebody want to make a motion to authorize the expenditure of up to $94,000 for between the village and the Coalition of Save Hempstead Harbor for the 2020 to 2021 water quality monitoring program? You have to speak up. Is that Tom?
I was muted.
Okay.
I'll make that proposal.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second that.
Is that Steve?
Yep.
Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposition? Okay, thank you. I do have the agreement ready to go to the village, but I held off until we had this meeting just to make sure that, we had everything, all the, I's dotted and the T's crossed. So I will submit that tomorrow. And speaking of grants for water monitoring, yesterday was the deadline for the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation for its Long Island Sound Futures Fund. We did apply for the 2021 to 2022 program, which would start next April or May. This year, they reduced the amount that you could apply for for water monitoring from 100,000 to 75,000. Even though the last couple of years, they've just given us a 75,000. Well, they gave 75,000 last year, and I guess it was 89,900 the year before. But so the maximum we could apply for was 75,000. So Carol and I worked on what we could do with that money, and basically the 75,000 would just cover the core program, the summer program. We propose to match that with the 14,000, similar to what we did this year for the annual report. We did not include the winter monitoring because that would put it too high for us to be able to know that we could fund that. But it's possible we might be able to go to Soil and Water Conservation District next year. So that's been submitted. We expect to hear probably in October, maybe late October is when they usually announce. We're not sure whether we're going to be able to get this. They have a long-standing rule that says they'll only fund the same program, same type program for 3 years in a row. We did, before we even contemplated an application, we did contact them and they told us that we could submit an application. So we're crossing our fingers that we will get it. If not, then we're going to have to really figure out next year, after October, what we're going to do next year. I think we've got a great program. We got letters of support from DEC Albany, from the Nassau County Health Department, from our county legislature, from the Stony Brook School of Marine and Atmospheric Sciences, and also from LINAP, Water Nitrogen Action Plan. I mean, those are all key players in water quality and water monitoring in the state, and all are urging NIFWIF to approve this. So we're crossing our fingers and hope we get it. Moving on to the Celino grant. As you'll recall, in 2017, we received actually 2 grants courtesy of former Senator Celino that totaled $250,000 for the 3 protection committees on the North Shore. That was following a year that we did not get funding from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and we struggled to find where we're going to get other funding. So of that 250,000, 80,000 went to Oyster Bay Cold Spring Harbor Protection Committee, which is being handled by the Friends of the Bay on their behalf. 80,000 for Manhasset Bay Protection Committee, and we got 90,000 because we're the ones administering it. They gave us 62,500 up front, and we recently finally expended that upfront payment, and then so we just in this last week or last couple of weeks submitted the first reimbursement beyond that. That required us to do what was called a quarterly report. And actually, this quarterly report goes back to the beginning of the grant to update them on everything that we've done, in accordance with the work plan, and how much is outstanding, and where any problems that we incurred. We're waiting to hear whether the amounts that we requested for reimbursement, which is $20,898. Are approvable. But out of that 20,898 that we applied for, 6,855 is for the Coalition Safe Hempstead Harbor for work that was under them. 4,035 from Friends of the Bay, and 10,008 for Hempstead Harbor Protection Committee to reimburse us. We have this grant technically expires at the end of this year. Of the 3 partners on this, we've pretty much expended most of what we set out for. We've expended 68,000 out of the 90, and we have others that are ready to go the next time around. Friends of the Bay has expended only 15,000 out of the 80, so they have quite a ways to go. And I'm sorry, the Municipal Bay Protection Committee has not expended any of its 80,000 yet. And that's because in order to expend that, they need to have a QOP and a DUAR, and they're in the process of trying to get that prepared. They went through a contractual issue with the town of North Hempstead. I think that's resolved. They're about to issue or have issued a contract to develop it. So it's very possible that we may have to ask for an extension on this grant because I don't think that all the work that they would do, could be done before the end of the year. And that's similar to in Friends of the Bay because they're also waiting for their those documents that will allow the cost for actual monitoring to be reimbursable. So we're playing that by ear. The DEC has been very cooperative with us. We'll see what happens on that.
Eric, I think it might not be clear that the grant provided reimbursement for the Hempstead Harbor Protection Committee of $48,000 toward water monitoring.
Yes, that was for the past water monitoring that we didn't get the grant, so that reimbursement. That's the biggest chunk of our share for sure. Oh. I was also in the last week or so, I was asked to write a letter of support for the Science Museum of Long Island, who was also applying to the Long Island Sound Futures Fund, and we did write a letter of support for them, and I'm going to ask Frank to maybe give an update on that.
Sure. So many of you know that the Science Museum of Long Island is located in the Leeds Pond Preserve over in Plandome Manor. And as part of a joint sustainability and educational initiative, they have applied for a grant of $50,000 to install a number of low-impact stormwater bioretention systems throughout the central part of the property. It's about 35 or 36 acres in entirety. But if any of you have been there, there's a section on the west lawn that has a slope of about 12 to 18 degrees, excuse me. And that water flows directly into Leeds Pond onto Plandome Road. So the objective here is to somehow divert and contain that runoff. So I've been asked by the museum to serve kind of as a special advisor for now and to kind of give them a little assistance along with Tony Canetta, who is a colleague of mine over at the Verca and Bartolucci when I was there, who was on the board. And we've incorporated a number of members and volunteers to remove some of the overgrown vegetation, and the new concept is that we want to have an opportunity to deal with the sustainability issues that the property has, but also educate children and homeowners on how they can employ some of these technologies in their homes to deal with stormwater management. So, some of the things that we're doing are rain barrels to capture runoff from the roofs of the few buildings that are there, which is something, I have one in my backyard. It's a very simple way that you can modify your stormwater management on property at a reasonable price. We're also going to build 2 rain gardens. We're going to do a number of infiltration perimeters and swales that will help to retain some of the water from that steep runoff. Dry wells, some trenches. We're going to put in some slot drains. We've had some issues with some of the catch basins there being filled with debris and concrete. So those are all going to be dealt with. So we think it's a great project. We're hoping that the grant gets accepted. It was submitted yesterday. And a lot of people worked very hard on it. So it looks like something that is going to benefit not only the facility itself, but anyone who goes there who wants to learn how they can take charge of their stormwater management on their property and help the environment little by little. So that's what we're doing.
Thanks, Frank. I think it's a great program, and it's good for education. It's good to it's good coming from a science-based organization. I think it's
Absolutely.
It could help convince a lot of others, including the next generation of leaders to understand it and to maybe try to implement some of those practices.
Yeah, it's good. Children in particular, because the museum has a lot of programs which now unfortunately have been suspended, but they will restart. A lot of programs for children, and exactly as you said, Eric, this younger generation really is growing up with this more so than we did, and I thought I did in the 70s when everybody was so gung-ho about the environment, but it never seemed to gain the traction that I think it will now. So it's all good stuff.
No, thank you. All right, and then the only other administrative matter, and I did mention it before, is that I created a YouTube channel so that we could post not only the recordings of these meetings, but anything else if we have videos. So if anybody has any kind of videos that they would like to share, I understand YouTube's very easy to search things. So, you can send them my way and I can post them on there. And you can also subscribe to our channel. Just we're under the name of Hempstead Harbor Protection Committee. So thank you. All right, that brings us to the water monitoring program update. Carol, I can turn it over to you.
So for the 2019-2020 program, we managed to continue the winter program through all of this COVID crisis and finished it up as we had intended to at the end of April. And so that meant bringing bacteria samples, and we decided to collect a couple of nitrogen samples, even though it was getting confusing about what was really included in this work plan, really wasn't. But we wanted to start something going in anticipation of what we thought was going to be happening this year with the installation of new storm drain inserts along our focus area in the Powerhouse Drain subwatershed. So we were able to do that. All of that data will be incorporated into the 2019 annual report, which we're feverishly trying to work on, along with all the other programs that we're, trying to pick up. It's been difficult, obviously, everybody knows the difficulties of trying to carry on with what's been going on with the pandemic. So we're doing that. We had to do, as Eric had mentioned, in order to be able to get the New York State grant, we were required to do what's called the Data Usability Assessment Report. It goes beyond our Qualified Assurance Project Plan, the QAP we always talk about. We had done a new QAP in 2019, but that was not enough. We had to go beyond that for New York State. And we had a choice of either doing a QAP for New York State or doing this data usability assessment report. And that's what we chose to do. Still a lot of work, very difficult, complicated to do for us. But we did one for 2017, 2018, and 2019. The 2019 one was just recently approved, as were the 2018 and 17. And because of the approval, we can now bill for expenses for 2019. That's what Eric had alluded to in terms of documents that are necessary to be able to use the New York State funds. So that, like the 2019 DUAR, or Data Usability Assessment Report, will be incorporated into our annual report as an appendix. So we were happy that it was approved. While we were doing that, we also realized that we had to bring the 2019 CLOP in alignment with the DUAR and also in alignment with some of the standards that are set for, it's complicated, but for completion, precision, there are calculations you do on your data. So we did a revision to the CLOP while it was all fresh, and we just received notification from EPA that our revision is approved. Then for the 2020-2021 program, which we just started, normally we would start in May, and of course everything was delayed. But considering what's been going on, you know, we're fortunate that the town of Oyster Bay provided a boat again, but we had to comply with all of the COVID social distancing guidelines, and that presented somewhat of a difficulty for us because we do a lot of work now, and to get it done we have a pretty large crew, and there's no way to social distance on a boat. So the only way I could do it was to kind of reschedule everything that we were doing to maximize the type of data that we're collecting. But we needed a second boat, and I, had to hire a second boat along, and the town is providing, as usual, its boat. And we're working in tandem. Today was the first day to see how this was going to work, so that we can continue to pick up water samples, both bacteria and nitrogen, as we had planned. The nitrogen is biweekly, the bacteria is weekly. What had to be cut was a profile. The vertical profile that we do is happening biweekly instead of weekly. It's very complicated, and it requires looking at a schedule so we all know who's doing what on what boat and when. But we feel that it was the best thing we could come up with to get the best data and feel that the program won't suffer from it. Also, we've planned things around the coalition, as you know, also participates apart from anything that the Hempstead Harbor Protection Committee is doing. The coalition participates in the Unified Water Study for Long Island Sound embayments. So we're getting somewhat of a profile when we do the ecological study for the harbor at 5 stations under that program, and I'm trying to do it on alternating weeks, so at least we have DO information, some of the baseline information that we always want to collect. We have it on a weekly basis because I'm alternating between our vertical profiles that we would normally do under the core program and what's happening with the Unified Water Study. As far as the FLUPC water monitoring project, that's also something that's apart from the Hempstead Harbor Protection Committee. The coalition was funded separately for the second year by Nassau County Soil and Water Conservation District. We were assured by the town of Oyster Bay that there would be FLUPCs in this year. As you know, that didn't happen last year. There were no clams, and this year we're hoping to get seed clams. Things are still shifting. We planned a program of where the FLUPCs were going, and the numbers were from 4 FLUPCs, which are floating upwater system units, to 11 it could have been. So we weren't really sure of how many clams. Each unit holds 1 million seed clams. We're really excited about this because the whole point of this program is to provide a pilot program. We've never had an aquaculture program in Hempstead Harbor before. We want it to be a pilot program. What we're testing for is to see what the impact of seed clams will be on water quality inside Tappan Marina. One of the things we found out by doing our initial testing last year, which was terrific, even though the clams weren't in, flupsies weren't in, but it was the first time ever that we tested at Tappan Marina and found out that Tappan Marina water quality reflects what's happening in the wider harbor, which is great news, because that's good news for the clams. So the 4 flupsies are in at the north end of Tappan Marina. So if anybody wants to go look at, go into Tappan and take a look, you'll see the 4 flupsies tied together, and motors are running pumps that will eventually circulate the water through these systems for the clams to make sure they get the nourishment they need. And we're testing right outside of the discharge area. So we started that. We were able to start testing in May. We did it again this morning. This was the 3rd time. We'll have a couple of more times before the clams are actually included. But this is a wonderful project for Tappan. I don't know whether the letter has been sent out, but a letter was planned from the town of Oyster Bay to slip owners in Tappan Marina to explain what flupsies are. There'll be signage there. The letter explains what the coalition is doing in the testing. So we're all anxious to find out, what the impact will be. I have a feeling, though, from what I've heard, Steve, you may know better about what's going on. There was, what I've heard, the most recent report I got was that there was a huge die-off with clams from Cornell because of COVID. You can imagine that these sea clams need care, and there were problems with getting the staff, the number of staff needed to take care of it. Is that right, Steve, would you say?
Yeah, so what happened was during COVID, they weren't allowed to have the same amount of employees in the workspace. And so what happened is they stopped spawning for a little while and producing new clams. So what they had to do is respawn. So that's why we're sort of on a delayed schedule here. And as far as I know, we're not the only people who they're providing clams for. So I don't know where we fall on their list, and we're going to get them when they're ready. So we're waiting on that. Should be soon.
So that pretty much gives you an idea of what's going on in Hempstead Harbor. And I should have mentioned that part of our revised program, because of COVID, also meant eliminating water sampling from the sewage treatment plant outfall. There's been contradictory research in terms of the viability of the virus in discharge water, probably more particularly in the city, where you could possibly be picking up samples from combined sewer overflow events, which includes raw sewage. For us, the Glen Cove Sewage Treatment Plant does have a UV system, but for us there were questions about whether it's been really tested that this virus reacts. Obviously, UV kills the indicator bacteria and bacteria that we're concerned about in Hempstead Harbor. Kills viruses as well. We're just feeling that we don't know everything about this virus to know that the current UV protocol, and this has nothing to do with how the plant is operated, it's just that everybody's still learning about this virus. And after having been on a webinar having looked at that where there were 200 participants from water monitoring groups across the country, these were some of the considerations, and we felt that there was no need to take a chance. Today, when we went into Glen Cove Creek anyway, we found that there's been a lot of upset with the docks in the area, so it's not the usual dock formation anyway that we had previously. So we'll see how things go. For now, we're not picking up samples at anywhere along the STP outfall, on either side of it, until we know better what to expect. But we are picking up a water sample further up in the creek and also at the head of the creek at 13. And we do a profile at 13. So we feel like we're still getting information about Glen Cove Creek. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Anybody have questions? If not, we'll move on. Rob Craffa is here. Are you still there, Rob? Are you muted?
I am now unmuted. Thanks.
Rob is the coordinator of the Oyster Bay Cold Spring Harbor Protection Committee. And when I heard he wished to join us this evening, I asked him if he would be able to give a short update on the very interesting project in Oyster Bay Cold Spring Harbor that is also funded by the Nassau County Soil and Water Conservation District for using drones with thermal imaging to detect illicit discharges. I did send an article around this morning. I don't know if everybody saw it, but that had some nice photos of the actual drone, explained the project very well. But Rob's been very instrumental in this. He organized a webinar that I and many others attended a couple months ago. It's probably about an hour and a half long about this whole project and the experience in other locations. And, it just so happened that was just before while the announcement was out for the Nassau County Soil and Water Conservation District funding, and they submitted an application and received about $10,000 to do this. So with that, Rob, you want to explain a little bit more about it?
Yeah, what Eric said. Good. That's it. No, but thanks for the opportunity, Eric, and I appreciate everyone's time tonight. I do encourage you to look back at the email Eric sent with the link, because there's a good article. A little bit of a sensational headline, but I think the content of the article is certainly good. But just to give you some context, in Cold Spring Harbor, we at our protection committee, we sort of felt it was overlooked. So a few years ago, we started a shellfish gardening program and got a bunch of people excited about it. And then we realized there really wasn't much happening to decrease the amount of areas of shellfish closure. So we started looking into ways of identifying contaminants from that. And so we engaged a project with Cornell Cooperative Extension to do some of the on-the-ground work of source detection, including microbial source tracking. And that's a contract that's just being started now and will continue throughout the year. At the same time, as Eric mentioned, we started talking to one of our participants, one of our representatives from a local village, had some interest in drones. So we had this presentation from Harkin Aerial about work that they had done with Walden Associates. These happen to be two companies based in Oyster Bay, but their initial work was in New Paltz using these drones or these unmanned aerial craft or something like that, whatever the term, because drones apparently has a little bit of a negative connotation now, so they use an acronym. For our purposes, these drones were these special cameras, not only just a regular digital camera, but a thermal imaging camera, particularly in mornings, right, with as little foliage as possible, so they can get good shots of the ground and detect slight, very, very slight temperature differences in the surface of the ground. And in New Paltz, the original project that they did this for, they were using it for public water supply to find if there were leaks in water mains and whatnot. And they certainly found that. Our interests were actually more in the marine environment and seeing if there were illicit discharges from commercial properties or residential properties. And so as Eric mentioned, we're very fortunate to apply for and receive a Nassau County Soil and Water District Conservation grant to sort of provide the air coverage of what Cornell was doing on the ground, which they also fund, Nassau County Soil and Water Conservation funded, around the the Cold Spring Harbor watershed. And as Eric said, all this was happening during COVID-19. And for me and for a lot of us, we're looking for bright spots. This was certainly a bright spot that something positive was moving forward. But not being content to leave well enough alone, when we had our first meeting via Zoom, the Protection Committee put up another $2,500 so that those flights wouldn't be just in the fall with Cornell when they were doing their ground sampling and their groundwork. But we thought, what a unique time in history. Hopefully we'll never have this again, where all the businesses are shut down. And so we can get a good baseline of these areas. And I should mention that the 4 areas of main concern were an area just, if those you know 25A as it goes through the village of Cold Spring Harbor, there's a street behind it called Spring Street, and that outfall behind that, which leads directly to Cold Spring Harbor, has a historically significant higher pollution load. So that was one area we were looking at, which had obviously a lot of commercial development because of the downtown area in Cold Spring Harbor. The second area that we're looking at is basically all residential area in Laurel Hollow, because Laurel Hollow, the little village beach on the west shore of Cold Spring Harbor, has had traditionally irregular beach closures for unknown reasons. So they were flying over that to see what they could find. The third of the 4 locations was Mill River, which outflows by Beekman Beach, sort of on the western end of southwestern corner of Oyster Bay. Not a lot of commercial area, but there is a mix of residential and some commercial or light industrial, I guess you could say, area in that. And then the fourth and other very significant commercial area is an area we call the Stands, which is on Bayville Avenue. It's where the Bayville Amusement Park is and Stelly and Ransom Beach. And the bars, restaurants, and commercial establishments on the south side of Bayville Road there have very wet backyards. And it's believed that those are contributing to poorer water quality in Mill Neck Creek, which is literally right next to it. So he flew these 4 areas with a thermal image camera in May with this extra funding that we provided, to get a baseline. And from that perspective, it was very good and very successful as an initial effort. We didn't find any smoking guns that, wow, let's go get these guys, this is what the problems are. But that's not so much a surprise right now. I think when we do the flights again in September or whenever they're organized, we will hopefully have businesses operating, and it'll hopefully be able to prepare a good compare and contrast photos from what we currently have. So in a nutshell, that's it. If it's successful, it can really be an amazing tool to help us quickly and efficiently identify illicit discharges or potential pollution sources, so that you then can have a group like Cornell Cooperative Extension or Nassau County Soil and Water Conservation District or whomever go to that specific property or parcel or spot and see if they can't do further testing, whether it's dye testing or whatever they need to do to find out what the potential pollution source could be. So,
Thank you, Rob. I mean, this is pretty important. I believe this is the first project of its kind on Long Island, perhaps even in New York State. And it's particularly important because when the new revised MS4 permit requirements come out, it's my guess from the meetings that I had been when they were developing it that illicit discharge detection and elimination is going to be one of the major focuses of the new permit. So having this tool available and having experience in Oyster Bay and Cold Spring Harbor will certainly pave the way for us if this thing becomes a good tool. So thank you, Rob.
thanks.
Anybody have questions about it? If not, we'll move on to, that was one of the projects funded by the Nassau County Soil and Water Conservation District. Fortunately, Nassau County Soil and Water Conservation District, like all the other districts in New York State, receive what they call Part C funding. It comes from the Environmental Protection Fund, and it's based on a number of factors, and the district has to meet certain criteria in order to even receive these funds. And the district has been very fortunate to be able to get these funds and to be able to use them to fund projects all around Nassau County, similar to the ones you've heard. This year, the district received $113,000, plus had some money left over from previous grants from previous year that wasn't spent. So actually, the district was able to fund about $134,000 worth of projects this year, 12 different projects. So here's just a list of some of them. The ones we happen to do very well in the on the North Shore area because we've gotten the $5,000 for the winter water monitoring. The Cedarmere has gotten almost $14,000 to restore the greenhouse on the property, and that hopefully will be used to grow some native plants that could be used there and perhaps elsewhere. $10,000 the Coalition of Safe Hempstead Harbor received for the Tappan monitoring. Town of North Hempstead received $5,000 to do native plantings at a pond off of Manhasset Bay. There's the North Shore Land Alliance has gotten $8,400 to enhance a meadow at one of their preserves. Hempstead Plains Project, $10,000. That's part education, part plantings. That they have a nice little program put together there. This almost $10,000 for Cold Spring Harbor Watershed Study. That's also Cornell Cooperative of Suffolk working with the Oyster Bay Cold Spring Harbor Protection Committee on issues in that area. This building of sustainable community through sustainable living. That's a town in North Hempstead. That's on the South Shore. They've had a very active program of sustainable agriculture with greenhouses, and it's in part of their energy park. They're doing, and they also have a shellfish hatchery there. There's a lot going on down in Point Lookout, and this will add to all of that. This invasive species education and outreach program is basically the Soil and Water Conservation District itself. This pays for one of our employees to really step up invasives education and outreach. So you'll be hearing a lot more from the Soil and Water District on that. Also, the Soil and Water Conservation District authorized $4,300 to purchase a drone and to have 2 of its employees trained and receive their licenses from the FAA to fly these. They won't be the thermal imaging. That's very expensive, but they will make these services available to each of our municipalities if you need some drone footage to look at something. And it'll help in a number of ways in order to track changes along our shorelines and that sort of thing. There's also a citizens group that's been working on Baxter's Pond. That's on the Manhasset Bay watershed. This would be the second year of funding for them, and they're going to be doing a lot of native plantings, at Baxter's Pond, and then the 9,830, which was what Rob was talking about with the thermal imaging. So a lot of very good projects, and we're looking forward to seeing all these come to fruition. So I'll go back to the agenda.
Eric?
Yeah.
Will I screw you up if I go to my 8 o'clock Zoom call?
No.
Okay. All right.
Thank you for coming. We're pretty much done anyway, so.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, that crept up on me. And I will talk to the mayor on Tuesday when I see him.
Okay. Thank you, Louis.
Great. Have a good night, everybody.
You too.
Good night.
Good night. Get home safe.
Okay, other than that, the Soil and Water Conservation District, the offices have to close. The employees have been working from home. Somebody's got some music going. The district's been, employees have been working from home. It's worked out pretty well. They have conference calls in the morning and the afternoon and are getting a lot done. And hopefully be back in the office soon, working on protocols in order to resume back in the office as soon as the go-ahead is there. So, which brings us to Friends of Cedarmere. Tom, are you still on? There he is. Oh. Hey, Tom?
Yes.
Okay, we're up to Friends of Cedarmere. Is that-
Yeah, I'm with you. I was just muted. Yeah, as you said, we been working on the greenhouse, and the greenhouse is finished as far as putting the glass in, getting the framework restored, the brick and masonry, everything's done. Now we just have to figure out what to do with it. So I'm looking for, I have one person who might be interested in an organization working with us to use it. But sort of exploring. If anybody's got any ideas or knows anybody who needs a little greenhouse space, we have it.
Okay.
But it's a very impressive structure being restored. You know, it's like 120 years old, 115 years old. Looks pretty good.
All right, thank you, Tom. It brings us to municipal updates. Who wants to start? Bruce, you want to tell us what's happening in Seacliff?
Unmute. How are you, Eric?
Good, Bruce.
Hey,
So, yeah,
tell those
the,
birds to shut up out there.
Yeah, the birds are actually kind of cool. I tell other people to shut up. We got the sewer project going in the middle of this COVID disaster, which has actually been quite good because traffic has been low and we've been blocking up streets. We should have the main trunk completed by the end of the summer and connected into the Glen Cove treatment plant. As probably most of you know, we came in significantly under budget on this project. We had a little bit more than $2 million left. So we are also looking to do Maple Avenue, 8th Avenue, an additional section of Central Avenue and Summit Avenue as part of the project.
Excellent.
Yep.
I mean, Aradas is going to be covered.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Steve, how about Oyster Bay?
All right, so we've been working to get this FLUPSI water monitoring program underway, as well as our other FLUPSIs, and putting them in different marinas throughout Oyster Bay, Tappan, Toe Bay, and at Teddy Roosevelt. And we're working with Cornell Cooperative Extension to prepare all the barrels, the meshes, and everything that we'll need to sort and clean these FLUPSIs and get that going.
Okay, great. How about Flower Hill, Frank? You got to unmute yourself.
Sorry.
Okay.
Nothing other than fighting in court over the 5G stuff that's going on in our village and all over the North Shore. So,
Can you tell us what that is?
there's a company called Extenet who is under contract to Verizon, and they are looking to install these high-powered 5G cell nodes throughout the village. And they work differently than 4G cell nodes and all the other Gs, where you have a tower with these big giant things on them. These are about 12 inches tall. They look like a giant coffee can, and they install them on telephone poles. And if they don't have a telephone pole, they will put one in, or they'll put some kind of fake tree or fake light. So they came to us saying that they wanted to install about 20 of these throughout the village. And a number of our residents have done research and have come up with questions about the safety of 5G, particularly when it's on a telephone pole next to your house and effectively 20 feet from a bedroom window of your children. So most of the other villages in the area, and now the town of North Hempstead, have all turned down their request since they have a federal right-of-way as part of the Telecommunications Act of 2015. Municipalities have no control over placement of telecommunication devices. So by us denying their application through our building department, they have sued us in federal court. They've sued a number of other villages. I know Lake Success is also knee-deep into this lawsuit. Some villages backed down. Muncie Park allowed them to put one on a new giant 35-foot flagpole that's going in the middle of the village. But because of the way our village is set up, one or two aren't going to work. They need about 20 of them. So that's where we are right now with that. And we're hoping that we will come to some kind of agreement to either reduce the amount or allow us, the village, to determine their location. But there's a lot of money at stake here for this company through Verizon. And what we're afraid of is if they get the green light to do it for Verizon, then other telecommunication companies are going to piggyback on. And you're going to start to see these things popping up all over the place. And no one's really quite sure yet if they're entirely safe, and there's conflicting information on both sides. So that's where we are with that. You can do some research. Extenet is, they're all over the news right now. As far as how they're trying to, weasel their way into a lot of the villages and towns on Long Island, us being one of the earlier ones. So we'll see whether or not our case will form a precedence. If not, we'll try to come up with some kind of negotiation with them. But unfortunately, municipalities have literally no control over telecommunication infrastructure in their communities.
Thank you.
What's happening with the village elections?
So the village elections right now are tentatively scheduled for September 15th. We have kind of a fractured board at this point, with one board member who has kind of broken away and decided she was going to run for mayor. So it's been a pretty ugly campaign so far. And, we'll see how things go. As many of you have heard, Bob McNamara, our mayor, passed away last month at the age of 82. It was a tremendous loss. Bob was a great guy, a very close friend of mine for many, many years. And Brian Harrington has stepped in. He was the deputy mayor. He's doing an outstanding job, and I support him for re-election to become the mayor in September. And that's where we are. And who knows with COVID, what's going to happen with elections? Everything's up in the air.
Brian used to be the village's representative to this committee, so we know him.
Yes, I know that. I took over for Brian when he was overwhelmed with so many other committees, as now I'm starting to be too.
All right. Well, thank you, Frank. Abby, how about Roslyn Harbor?
Oh, I have nothing new to report.
Okay.
Quiet.
Rocco, how about Glen Cove?
Not much besides East Island Tidal Gates project. The permits, we're still waiting on the permits from the DC, and we're still preparing the bidding docs in the meantime. There was a grant, a lead line service line grant that was awarded to the city recently. We're still working on that. It's with the mayor right now for his signature. Yeah, they're going to be throwing us some money to replace some of the lead service lines within the city.
That's a great project. It's not costing the city a penny, right?
Correct.
Did I miss anybody? Any municipalities? I think I got everybody. All right, thank you, everybody. Anybody have any other business?
I was wondering, Bruce, do you know what's going on with the formerly known as Hinfin? I see their construction start up again, but I mean, as far as sewer hookups, repaving of the road, all that stuff.
Well, they are putting in their own forced line. I know that they've picked a contractor. I don't know why they haven't begun, but they've been working with Nassau County because Nassau County was going to be redoing the majority of Shore Road, and they've held off waiting for Racanelli to get that sewer line in.
Yeah, I've seen them out in front of Cedarmere too. We have a lot of drainage issues in the neighborhood. But they're going to repave the whole thing, I guess, from Roslyn all the way to Seacliff.
Yeah.
Up the hill.
Well, they're going to have to do up the hill since they're doing that sewer line. They got to repave from curb to curb.
Right.
I see. I've been by the construction site a few times. There's a lot of work going on down there.
Yeah, they got the next floor is going up.
Yeah.
It's all these prefab panels that they bolt them together.
It's curtain wall technology. It's kind of state of the art.
All right. Anybody else got any other business? If not, thank you for all coming. I just want to mention that as of now, the Seacliff Mini Mart is still on for Sunday, October 4th. So we did pay for a booth there, and we could use some volunteers to come down. It's all day. I'll be sending out something closer to the date, and hopefully it's still on. They said it's rain or shine. They didn't say whether it's virus or shine, but we'll see. It's always a good event, and maybe by then, things will be opened up a little bit more. So
yeah, Eric, I wouldn't count on that.
Yeah.
I don't see how you could have it. You'd have to have everybody 6 feet apart.
25,000 people on Seacliff Avenue.
Yeah.
First weekend in October, probably not a good idea. But not my call.
You could paint marks all around, 6 feet apart. Everybody stand on them.
Yeah, I'm not holding my breath.
Okay.
This traditionally is our last meeting. We usually take the summer off so everybody can get out and enjoy themselves. So we don't have any meetings planned until September 9th. We could always, do one of these fairly easily if something comes up. So, stay tuned. And, anybody want to give any feedback about how things went today? You like this format?
Oh, great.
Yeah, this was fine.
Fine.
Very nice.
All right, I'm glad it worked out. So thank you, everybody. And I will send minutes around, and it'll be, recording will, be posted. So thank you for all joining us.
Happy summer.
Thank
night,
you.
everybody.
Good summer,
Good
guys.
night.
Bye. Good night, everyone.
Yeah.
Good night. Have a good summer.